And like I said, India did not suffer the worst of it. Quite the opposite, actually. India is predicted to be the fastest growing major economy this year. And this is not just a fluke. It's not like India just got lucky. India remains strong because of its approach to this war, because of how it handled the crisis and the policy it followed. It's a policy that keeps India first, a policy that balances national interest with international responsibility without grandstanding. The past 1 year has made India an outlier, also a leader. Tonight, we want to talk about how India navigated this global storm. The 5 things that made India stand out. First, India's neutral and pragmatic stance. Second, its influence over Russia. Third, its potential to play peacemaker. Fourth, India's decision to buy Russian oil despite Western pressure. And fifth, its ability to call out the West's hypocrisy. 5 things that contributed to how India fared. Let's take these one by one. India has consciously chosen not to parrot the West script because the diktat from the West is quite clear: you're either with us or against us. India refused to play that game from day one. Just yesterday, India abstained on a vote against Russia at the United Nations. The 47th time it has done this. You see, the United Nations has become a playground for the West to flex its diplomatic muscle. But sanctions and censure do not resolve wars or conflicts, so India has abstained. It has steered clear of the West's economic war against Russia. New Delhi is not a signatory to any sanctions against Russia. Instead, it has chosen the path of quiet yet constructive diplomacy, which brings us to point number 2, India's leverage with Russia. The West has now acknowledged it, that India's influence over Moscow is an asset. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the same in a recent interview. He said that India prevented Russia from using nukes. He said the US intelligence had a tip-off that Russia could use tactical nuclear weapons against Ukraine last year. Guess who intervened? India did.
We urged, and I think successfully, other countries that might have a little bit more influence with Russia these days, like China, but also other countries like India, to engage him directly about their absolute opposition to any use of nuclear weapons. And we know that they conveyed those messages, and I think that had some effect.
Last year, the CIA chief had a similar story to tell. In fact, I have a quote from what he said. I think it has also been very useful that Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi in India have also raised their concerns about the use of nuclear weapons. I think that's also having an impact on the Russians. India has quietly been working behind the scenes. It played a role in persuading Russia to stop shelling in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It engaged in back-channel diplomacy to get the Ukraine grain deal signed. That's how India has contributed. Point number 3, India is a potential peacemaker. Well, how's that? India is a strategic partner of both America and Russia. It has leverage with both. It may have strong ties with Russia, but that doesn't mean it condones Russia's war. Here's a quote. Today's era is not an era of war, and I have spoken to you on the phone about this. Do you know who said that? Prime Minister Modi of India. He said this to Russian President Vladimir Putin, point blank, that this is not an era of war. And this was at the SCO summit last year, and it had just the right impact. The West welcomed Prime Minister Modi's remark. The world realized that when India speaks, Putin listens. Also, when the West puts pressure, India can resist. That's point number 4, buying Russian oil. Last summer was a period of chaos. The world's energy sector was in crisis. Oil prices had shot through the roof, but India remained largely unhurt. How did that happen? It's because India increased purchases of Russian oil. This oil was coming at steep discounts, and India bought it. Latest data suggests that Russia now fulfills 30% of India's oil needs. Last month, India bought 1.4 million barrels of oil from Russia, the highest amount it has ever purchased from Russia. And India is unapologetic. The West complained, of course, and repeatedly. Listen to what the White House said in April last year.
Well, we are, the president both conveyed that we are here to help them diversify their means of importing oil. Again, the imports from the United States are already significant, or much bigger than the imports that they get from Russia. And we, of course, the president conveyed very clearly that it is not in their interest to increase that. But beyond that, I would let the Indian leaders speak for themselves.
It was basically a sermon on why India should not buy Russian oil, and many others spoke in the same vein, Foreign Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, told the West to back off.
It is our fundamental obligation to ensure that the Indian consumer has the best possible access on the most advantageous terms to international markets. And in that respect, quite honestly, we have seen that the India-Russia relationship has worked to advantage. So if it works to my advantage, I would like to keep that going.
If it works to my advantage, I would like to keep it going. Quite a confident declaration there, and not a one-off. Over the past year, India took on the West. It stood up to tremendous Western pressure, and it exposed the West's hypocrisy repeatedly. And now European leaders are echoing India's line. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz quoted India's foreign minister at the Munich Security Conference. Let me tell you what he said. Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. New Delhi is showing the West a mirror, and the West is not delighted by what it sees in that mirror. The world order is changing, India is emerging taller and on the right side of history.